Hello, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, and welcome from wherever you're joining us. So here we are once again, another Salesforce release. Spring 22 is upon us, but do not fear, Bob Buzzard is here to go through the new features and everything you need to know for this release. I am, of course, referring to my long-time associate, BrightGen's CTO, Salesforce MVP, and all-round Salesforce genius, Keir Bowden. There's nothing Keir likes than to sit down with a nice cup of tea and wade through 500 or 600 pages of release notes, so you don't have to. Anyway, enough of my waffle. It's time for the main event. As always, feel free to pose any questions in the webinar console, and I'll collate those, and Keir will answer those at the end of the session. So prepare to be amazed by the Salesforce legend that is Mr. Keir Bowden. And here's the agenda we'll be going through.
Thanks very much, Clive. Seamless as always. So as we can see there, our first topic is general updates. So these are changes and requirements that apply across the entire Salesforce application. As is traditional, we start with the browser requirements, which should be familiar to everyone because they're normally exactly the same. Latest stable. Classic supports Internet Explorer 11, as well as Edge Chromium, Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. Tableau CRM, latest stable Edge Chromium, Chrome, and Firefox, but not Safari for whatever reason, still not Safari. If you want to see full details of everything that's supported in every aspect of Salesforce, follow the short link shown there. Don't worry about capturing that. As usual, we'll be sharing the slide deck across once this is done, rather. Multi-factor authentication, that's here now. That is a requirement. We've mentioned this before, but now all Salesforce customers are contractually obliged to implement multi-factor authentication as of yesterday. If you haven't encountered this before, that kind of sounds like you're in breach of that requirement. But basically, multi-factor authentication, Salesforce are mandating 2 factors. There could be more in the future, but at the moment it's 2. Something you know, so your password, and something you have, an authenticator app on a phone or on another device that generates a one-time time-limited code. This is required for all internal user access from the 1st of February, for direct login and for single sign-on. For single sign-on, the idea is that can do the multi-factor authentication for you. Our understanding is that this won't be required for sandboxes on that date, but that is likely to come in the future. If you haven't set it up already, have a look at the multi-factor assistant in the Lightning Experience setup, or check out the rollout pack at the short link shown. Einstein Search, this is now on by default for the Lightning Experience, and there's a couple of additional features in this release. Natural language searching across tasks, so you can ask it questions like you would any other human being. My task this week, tasked with a status not started, for example. And instant search results will show the profile picture for records that support profile pictures. So by default, that's people and groups in Chatter. And if you enable it, that includes social accounts and contacts and leads for Twitter. Next up, we have mobile. As usual, specific device requirements around mobile, and you can find those at the short link shown. As always, note that you're not restricted in terms of the devices that you can use, but you may not get support from Salesforce if your device isn't one of those that they have the ability to test against. The full width Lightning on tablet experience is generally available. This is for both iOS and Android devices, which is a little bit of a change for Salesforce, because normally iOS comes first and Android lags a bit behind, so it's nice to see both of those are in there. Yeah, and this is the full width experience rather than the squashed Salesforce application. And mobile home now supports a pinned lists card, which, so if you've got users that have a set of commonly used lists that they're partial to and that they drive most of their work from, they can add those to the mobile home screen as shown in the little grab there. Users can personalize those cards, and you can also have more than one, so you can have multiple pinned lists that you scroll through, all on the mobile home page. That's it for mobile, not too many changes there, the big thing being the full width experience. Next up, we have analytics. Dynamic dashboard gauge charts. So if you were in the Winter 22 webinar, I think it was, these were in beta then. So these allow you to create dashboard gauges where the metric and the target come from report summaries or record fields rather than being hard-coded. So in the example here, I'm using the BrightGen's skills tracking app, and I want to track the service team skills in Apex. So we've got quite a few customers who need this skill. So I've got a target that at least 50% of the service team in Whittam must be skilled in Apex. So I'm adding in a dynamic gauge dashboard component based on the service Whittam with Apex report, as you can see at the top there, and I choose dynamic mode. So when it's dynamic, I can then set the target, that's the gauge indicator, the kind of the needle, and that's going to be the actual head count from the skill record that tracks Apex. And the total or max value for the gauge will be the total number of employees, the total number of people that we have. And I then set 50% as the green segment. That's basically means we're hitting the target, so it needs to go green from that point on. So here we can see that the service team currently have 60% of the total, so that's all good, 60% of the employees. So we have more than 5. Just 5 was a nice number for me to test against. So we got 5 people, 3 of them have got that, so we got 60%. However, if I add another team member, I don't have to do any reconfiguration of the dashboard component. I just refresh the dashboard. You can see I've now got 6 people as the total number on the gauge, and the needle has moved over to 67% because 4 of those 6 have now got Apex. So it's basically, as the business changes, you don't need to mess around and go and update your dashboard components. They just react based on the data that's in there. Moving on to Tableau CRM. So dashboards can now display date and time information in your local time zone as opposed to GMT, which sounds very flexible, but sadly it's not. This is basically org level. So yes, you don't have to show everything in GMT, but you do choose another single time zone and you display everything in that and hope your users are happy with it. When you define the new time zone, you'll need to refresh all your data sets. And this only applies to new dashboards. The existing ones will continue to display in GMT. And you can now swap values in one data source with those from another, as long as the key pairs match. And you can achieve this via the update node, as you can see in the screenshot on the right. The drop transformation has had a change. This now allows you to keep the columns you need and discard the rest, whereas the current behavior, which is still there, is basically you can identify those you want to drop if you want to keep most of them. So you want to keep most of them, put it in drop mode and drop the 1 or 2. If you want to drop most of them, put it in keep mode and just specify those 1 or 2, so less clicking. And you can now view sentiment as a decimal measure. So that's basically on a 5-point scale, and you can then use that in calculations, so to figure out maybe the average sentiment on a particular product, whether that's positive or negative. Embedding Lightning components is generally available in Spring 22. We're kind of seeing this across most of the Salesforce product now, I would say, that anything, any kind of custom UI type of functionality is provided by dropping Lightning Web Components into something. So in this case, it's Tableau CRM dashboards. But this is not available for mobile applications. You can access it on mobile, but you have to use the web browser instead. And you can now change the owner of a record from the custom actions menu on charts and table cells. You can now fit content better in Explorer and dashboard tables by dragging the right-hand border, which is marked with a 1 there. You can see the arrows, so you can drag that sash across, as we used to call it in old HTML days. And you can also configure, as you can see in points 2 and 3, you can configure column titles and the values to wrap, and you can do that independently of each other. So you can not wrap the title, but you can wrap the data or vice versa. And when you're creating an application from a template, you can see full details of what happened. So what assets were created, or if something went wrong, what failed. And you do that by accessing the log on the details page of the new application. A couple of other enhancements in Tableau. Navigation breadcrumbs, they allow you to see exactly where you are based on the asset type icon marked with a 1. The source page the asset came from, marked with a 2 there, and the type of the asset that is currently open, marked with a 3. And you can now view lenses and data sets in the Salesforce mobile app via the Analytics tab. So not the Tableau CRM app, but the Salesforce mobile app. But speaking of the Tableau CRM mobile app, there is a new version of that, 14.2. So it's got the usual kind of bug fixes, usability enhancements that don't have a huge impact. But also in iOS, you can now sort tables by tapping column headers in dashboards. Whereas on the Android app, you can save a data exploration as a lens, carry out one-tap actions, and also use pivot tables, including formatting and multiple measures. Which moves us on to customization. There's a new permission in town around privacy, the Enhanced Personal Information Management permission. So this basically hides information from external users. By default, there's 30 fields, including things like address, extension, manager, but you can configure those via a field set, via personal info _EPM field set. Which I think is a really nice way of being able to configure these kind of things. Field sets are really useful. We use them quite a lot in Bright Media. This replaces the hide personal information setting that was kicking around, because obviously it's a lot more granular now. And this is a release update. So it's available now, and it will be enforced in winter 23. Winter 23 sounds like a long time away. That will be what, October 2022. So not actually that far, given that we're in February 2022 already. There is new functionality in the Lightning App Builder that monitors the slowest desktop record pages. So basically, any desktop record page that takes 4 seconds or longer will render you a prompt in the App Builder, which will tell you that it's not running that well, and it will allow you to navigate to the Lightning Usage app and dig into the details of where that time is actually going. Lightning Web Security is generally available. So this is basically a replacement for the locker service, but only for Lightning Web Components. So Aura will continue to use the locker service. This is not enabled by default. It will be enabled on a rolling basis once Spring 22 goes live, which is, I think, this weekend and the following weekend. Only orgs with custom Lightning Web Components will be enabled, and you'll receive an email 1 month in advance that this is going to happen. The last line there, this change is not expected to require changes to your Lightning Web Component code, but obviously make sure you test it thoroughly in a sandbox before you turn it on, because if there are changes needed, then things will break. Something also to note is that with the locker service, you could change the API version of an Aura component, so you could turn it off. You had to go back to API version 39, so you lost a lot of functionality, but you could do that. Lightning Web Security is on or off for the whole org, so there's no way of getting that to apply only to certain components. And now for something completely different. This is customization, not the feature itself so much, but the requirements, which are in bold at the top there. I've not seen this Salesforce roll anything out like this before, so I thought I'd draw attention to it. Basically, to use this feature, you will need professional services and unlimited edition with signature or premier priority support. So I don't know, that kind of suggests to me that you might encounter some challenges when you're using this, because they're saying that you need to have a bunch of Salesforce experts available to you in a couple of different ways. So I guess caveat emptor. Back to the feature. So what this allows you to do is show a subset of the records to a user in certain areas of the UI. For example, to help service managers maybe to focus on the customer accounts that they're responsible for. This applies to custom and a subset of standard objects as shown here. But it's important to remember that users can still access all records. You're just kind of trying to give them some focus in certain areas. And these are the aspects of the UI that it can be applied across. But as I say, they can always still get to all the records if they need to. They just won't be front and center for them. Moving on to Einstein Automate. So this is the new name for low and no code automation. The Orchestrator is generally available. So this allows you to define orchestration across an automation across the entire life cycle of a record, rather than necessarily reacting to particular changes in state. So rather than focusing on automation as this database action happened, therefore I need to do something. This is more about keep an eye on a record, and when it enters this particular life cycle stage, here is the automation that needs to take place. I think it allows you to think about automation more holistically, and get a better sense of what automation is across the entirety of a custom object, standard object, etc. Orchestrations can involve multiple people, and they are made up of one or more stages, and each stage contains one or more steps, and basically each step is a flow. So a step is a flow, the stages are flows, and there's other flows around that mean you need to build quite a lot of flows to get this orchestration working. So you need to do a bit of planning in advance rather than just sitting down and trying to work things out. So the work assigned to users, so their assigned flows effectively are displayed on the record pages they view, and that's achieved via the new Orchestrator work guide standard Lightning Web component. And the orchestration itself can apply logic to decision elements and flows that determine things like should a stage exit, should this step be entered, should this step exit, and these are known as evaluation flows. So you've got flows that actually do the work and also flows that decide whether the work needs to be done. So as I say, there's a fair bit of configuration. I mean, I think flow is effectively development just using a different medium to code. So there's a fair bit to think about there. So definitely do some design up front rather than sitting down and trying to just create flows to solve a situation without thinking it through. So Orchestrator, you can assign interactive steps to groups and queues rather than specific users, allowing you to avoid bottlenecks. All members get notified when their work is assigned, but the first to complete the work wins, and the caveat to that is everybody else's in progress work gets discarded even if they were about to finish it. So it might not go down too well with the users, so I treat this feature with a little caution and make sure you're not going to annoy your users by getting them to do work that you then don't actually do anything with. In Orchestrator, you can also process background steps asynchronously and trigger orchestrations from custom code like you do with flows. And those last two features are new since Orchestrator was in beta. You can view the in-progress orchestration debug information. You can do that in production. You really don't want to. You should do that in a sandbox. And you can also debug failed orchestrations to find out more about them. Clearly, that's going to be very useful in production, more than sandboxes, I would think. There's a couple of gotchas around deploying orchestrations. If you're packaging them, you can't use specific usernames for step assignments. Hopefully that's obvious because those users won't exist in the org that it gets deployed into necessarily. So basically you have to define constants and then you update those constants after deployment. So it's actually a bit better anyway, because you've got a bit more abstraction. And if you're using change sets, you have to deploy the flows first, then activate them, and then deploy the orchestrations that are built on top of them. So it's a multi-step change set process. You won't be able to do it all in one go. A couple of other improvements on Orchestrator from the beta. The Orchestrator work items list view, that allows you to see all assigned work items and reassign those that haven't yet been completed. And there's also an orchestration runs list view that shows the status of the runs and allows you to cancel any or all of those that are in progress. Moving on to Flow Builder. Auto layout is now generally available. This is the default layout for flows and user templates going forward. It's also been my default for quite some time because the auto layout just kind of saves me having to keep moving things around when I decide I need something new. I definitely recommend it. The buttons at the bottom of the screen flow footer, you can change those now from things like previous, pause, next, finish. You can change those to something more meaningful to your users, or you can translate them if your users don't speak English. You can generate choice buttons from a collection of records rather than having to define them in advance, so it gives you a bit more dynamic capability. And a really nice new element, the collection filter. So rather than having to loop through a collection and discard the records that you're not interested in, you basically got a single element that you can give it a collection, define some conditional logic, and then you'll get back a new collection with just the ones that match your conditional logic, match your filters effectively, but you haven't had to burn a load of steps in order to get there. Another really nice feature, this one, record triggered flows. So basically, with record triggered flows, you can now define the order of execution. So you can specify a value of between 1 and 2000 to determine when a record trigger flows. So before save, after save flow. 1 to 1000 run first, but you can still have multiples with the same value, and they will run in API name alphabetical order. I would say if you want them to run in a particular order, just because they happen to be at the moment in API name alphabetical order, that's not a particularly resilient approach. So if you actually care about the order, you should definitely explicitly specify a number rather than hoping no one else creates an API name, a flow, sorry, with the same value with a different API name that maybe makes things run out of order. Flows with no value run next in the order of their created date, so you can't change that. Because obviously the created date is when they were created, and then 1001 to 2000 run, and again the API name is the tiebreaker if multiple of them have the same value. So yeah, flows without values, they run in the created date order. If you want them to run first, or sorry, to run in a particular order, if you want them to run not in the middle, then all you have to do is give them some values. So basically I would say that if you're going to use this, if it actually matters what order things run in, then you should give everything an order rather than leaving some without an order. Just adds a lot of clarity to anyone that comes afterwards and is trying to understand your automation. You can now open subflows from the auto layout canvas, as shown in the little screen grab there. The name and the version of the flow appear in the browser tab that it runs in, so you don't have to look at the actual screen itself, you can just look at the browser tab. The add element menu has a couple more shortcuts, as you can see again in the screenshot here. And multi-column screen elements are now available up to a maximum of 4 columns. So this supersedes the 2-column flow layouts that have been available for a couple of releases. And finally, URLs launched screen flows have a white background. It was grey, and that doesn't meet accessibility guidelines, so that's being changed. And the Flow Trigger Explorer, so this allows you to specify an object, which you can see marked to the 1 when an opportunity, specify the operation, which is 2. In this case, it's updated. And from there, you can see all the before and after save flows, which is 3 and 4. And you can also open them directly using one of the links, one of the things highlighted in blue, as you can see marked to the 5 there in the actions and related records. Close one opportunities, you could click on that and see the after save flows. And the asynchronous paths are also shown, which is marked with a 6 down the bottom. And you can also use the menu, which is marked on the top right with a 7, to activate a flow, deactivate the flow, or to see more details about it. One thing to notice here, this isn't showing you what would happen now if you updated an opportunity, because if you look at the screenshot, half of them are inactive. So all it's showing you is all the flows that are defined, regardless of whether they're actually applying or not. Something to bear in mind there. Next up, sales. So collaborative forecasts now have an improved setup look and feel, which is much more wizard based. So basically, first you have a screen that allows you to choose an object, opportunity in this case. Then you choose the measure, standard field like amount or a custom field. Then the date type, which determines the date field you're going to use in the forecast calculation. Close date of the opportunity here, all standard stuff. Choose the hierarchy that you're going to use to group forecasts. The user's role in this case, all fairly standard. Choose any filters and then give it a name. Once you've done that, you'll then get a summary field that shows you all of the key information that you've got there, and you can carry on and then save your forecast type, or if you don't like any of that, you can go back and tweak it and change it. So much clearer what you're actually creating there. Next are features that I think managers are going to love, sales reps maybe not so much. Calling out changes in forecasts. So you check the box to enable this, so the one that's highlighted there, show the changes in the last 7 days. And then when you view the forecast, you'll get some styling and indicators of the direction of change. So we can see the green one went up, so that's good. The red one went down, so someone's going to have a possibly difficult conversation. And if there's anything of interest, so it went down, you can hover over it and find out exactly what happened. Oh, This went down by 10K and it went down on that day. Let's go and find out what that was about and ask the salesman what they're going to do to resolve that situation. You can choose opportunity record types to include or exclude in forecasts, and you configure this in the custom filter page of the setup flow that we looked at earlier on. Each forecast type can have its own custom filter, and that's applied when the user selects the type from the forecast page, which you can see clearly marked in the breadcrumbs on the final screen grab there. The forecast opportunity revenue with custom filter RT renewals. Org-wide sharing for products is now available as a release update. This will be applied in the next release, which is summer 22. That should be early mid-June, so about 4 months away. And basically this applies to internal and external users. So as part of this, guest user access to products will be set to private, so they won't get any access to any products that they don't own, and they can't own records, so they won't get any access to any products. So you'll need to create guest user sharing rules if you want to open that up again. And if you're considering enabling this, as always, make sure you test it in a sandbox. Don't just enable it in production and see what happens. Some other sales enhancements: you can create custom reports using list emails as the primary type. If you haven't already verified your email address, which you've had to do for a while now, but if you're on a more mature org, you'll need to do this by winter 23, which is October 2022. Otherwise, your emails to leads and contacts will be blocked. Custom Lightning Web Components can be made available to the email builder, as I mentioned earlier, same way they can with Tableau CRM. This is definitely becoming a theme. So you specify a target of lightning _ static email, and that will be available in the palette to be dropped in. And finally, you can sort past activities by their completed date, whereas previously only the due date was supported. Next up, we have Pardot. So Pardot, you can customize your form styles in the enhanced landing page builder. You can apply colors, fonts, and margins. You can, if you unpublish a landing page, you can set the redirect so you can determine where that goes to. You can add scripts to landing pages. Your email template types for Salesforce Engage, you can choose which ones to make available there. And Einstein engagement frequency predicts the optimal send frequency and stores this in a prospect field that you can use to filter lists or as an engagement studio criteria. Once enabled, when adequate setup data is available, the model will automatically train and the frequency categories will simply appear. So it's very much WYSIWYG. The enhanced landing page builder got a little bit more enhanced with regard to page layouts. So as shown with the 1, you can either drag a layout into the page or as shown in the 2 and 3, you can click on the canvas and search or select the component you want to add. A couple of more additions around Pardot. Automation emails from the Lightning experience. So these are basically Lightning email templates they've created, and you activate those for automation in the Lightning email builder. They become available. They are now available for for Pardot automation rules and completion actions. You can specify tracker domains when activating emails for use in automations, which allows you to rewrite the links that go in that email with your preferred domain. Metrics Guard for Pardot email now has improved filtering thresholds to block out bot clicks, so you don't count those. And now when you edit or create a visitor filter, future activities are filtered from users associated with the IP address or hostname up to 90 days ago, rather than as it used to be, which was only for new visitors. So basically, they're applied retroactively, but to users that existed retroactively. It doesn't go back and look at activities that took place 90 days ago, just when those users were associated. Service Cloud next. First up, Service Cloud Voice. You can now route calls to the correct agent with omni-channel flows, which gives you a lot of flexibility and a lot of capability there. Supervisors can now listen into calls. The agent will know about this, but the customer won't. but a supervisor can only listen into a single call at a time, which kind of makes sense. I don't know how you'd manage to listen to multiple calls anyway. It would certainly be confusing. And universal call recording allows a Salesforce user to listen to a call recording from any contact center they have access to, whereas previously it was just their own contact center and none of the others. And finally, on voice, the caller phone number and phone channel number can now be used to associate calls to a contact or account record. So basically, if you make that association, then anytime a call comes in from that phone number and phone channel number, it will be associated with that contact or account record, and you'll be displayed that. Routing next, you can manage all agents now from the Omni Supervisor tab, so you can see what everyone's up to, you can search things, you can filter things, etc. And you can also use an on-channel subflow to route non-real-time work. So it used to be you could use this just for calls, that kind of thing, calls or chats. Whereas now you can route other things, so those without a live customer attached to them waiting for a response. So things like cases, leads, and custom objects. But what it means is you get access to omni-channel features like popping the screen to show the agent the case they need to be working on when it is assigned to them. Moving on to bots, a single bot can now support multiple languages, over 17 in fact. Interesting number, the fact that it's not exactly 17, it's over. I don't know if that's 18 or if that's more. The generate completed goal log action identifies the point in a dialogue flow when the customer goal is considered complete. So you can then report on that to show how often you're actually hitting that point. You know, are you satisfying customers or not? And also there's some new standard reports to help you visualize the engagement and how your knowledge articles are performing in the bot world. And bots now have a couple of additional security certifications, so they're a bit more secure than they used to be. The bots builder has been reimagined as the conversation canvas. So the configuration details have been moved to the step properties sidebar, which makes it easier to visualize the flow of the bot conversation because you've just got the high level details in the middle there. And as you change conditions, as you change the step properties, those dialogue steps automatically update with the key information. So you can visualize what's happening without previewing the entire bot, but without having to have all the gnarly detail in there as well. And finally, in Service Cloud, knowledge. You can now share article links that never expire, even if a new version of the article is published. They're basically a universal link. If there's an image in the article, then clicking it will now open a full-size view in a pop-up window. And if you've got the two components in the same page, which both decide to display the same article, they both maybe match some filtering or searching, that used to be double counted as two article views, even though there was only really one. So that's now been rectified, so you won't get that double counting anymore. Moving on to experiences. So Lightning Experience now has a digital experiences tab, which replaces the CMS app that you might remember from before. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides, but not a lot. You can see that's got the details of all your workspaces, all your sites, lets you get into the builder quite easily, so a home page effectively. You can now archive a site when you're finished with it, and when you do this, all users, including admins, just see an in maintenance page. You can archive up to 100 sites, and these don't count against your Salesforce limits for sites. If you decide you do need it after all, you can simply unarchive it, which restores the site. This isn't enabled by default, this whole archiving concept. You need to contact customer support to get them to enable that for you. And the Digital Experiences app allows you to view your site's detail along with the underlying framework that was used to build it. And also to archive or unarchive a site, assuming that you've enabled that. So you can see the details there. I can see it's an Aura framework. And up on the top right, I've got Workspaces Builder linked to site. And because I've enabled archiving, I've got the archive option. If you're using the Lightning Web Runtime, so that's the one that is for pure Lightning Web Component sites, you can now choose from the full library of Google fonts. And you can also specify the base desktop or mobile font size in pixels or rems, so you've got full control over the text that is displayed. And a few other changes in experiences. Account role optimization is now on by default for new sites and role-based licenses. So that means customer community plus and partner community licenses. So this basically minimizes the number of roles created, whereas previously you always got, every time you created a new role in a community, you got 3 roles suddenly made available. So that allows you to scale to larger numbers. So if you've got a community or an experience, sorry, that needs to scale to millions, then you definitely want account role optimization on. Sites that are using a shared certificate for Salesforce's content delivery network, they can now switch to a single named certificate with no downtime. New sites will go to a single certificate by default. Experienced sites can now use Slack as a single sign-on authentication provider. And finally, you can now include records owned by high volume and system users in criteria-based sharing. Can't be used in role-based sharing because high volume users don't have roles. Moving on to our last section, fond farewells. So here's the features that will be sleeping with the fishes, either as part of this release or in the very near future. Legacywork.com feature retires in this release. If anyone bought that, we did actually. It was all around being able to give people badges, to have recognition, to kind of give them feedback. There's all kind of trying to be an ongoing, constant review of work. It certainly wasn't very popular in the UK because we don't really like that idea of just being able to get feedback from anyone with no warning. The legacy APIs versions 7 to 20 are deprecated. These are available until summer 22, after which they will start erroring. That's only 4 months away, so the clock is really ticking now. The legacy tablet apps will retire in spring 23, so in 1 year's time. These are the single column tablet app and the old Salesforce One app. If you're using tablets, you really want to switch to the new Lightning on tablet application, much better. And Salesforce for Outlook is retiring in June 2023, which seems a long way out, but in reality isn't actually that far. You want to move to one of Outlook integration or Einstein activity capture. So that brings us to the end of the fond farewells, or does it? It doesn't actually. There is one more fond farewell, a very personal one for me, and that is Clive Platt. We're saying a fond farewell to Mr. Platt. He's been with us at BrightGen for 16 years. He's been my partner in crime on webinars for 30 of them. He's facilitated hundreds of questions from our attendees, and he's told thousands of bad jokes to anyone who will listen to them. This is the last webinar that Clive and I will be presenting together. Clive, would you like to say a few words?
Well, you know, just wiping a tear away from my eye at the moment. Yes, especially about the thousands of bad jokes. If only that wasn't true. But anyway, so yeah, so today's tinged with sadness for me, as this will be my last as Keir's sidekick. Yes, been the head of service management at BrightGen for nearly 16 years, and I'll be retiring at the end of April, which means I won't be attending any more release webinars. I want to thank Keir for all the fun we've had at these sessions, and of course to you, our audience, for joining us and putting up with me, my cheesy intros, and occasional dad jokes, although I'm not sure I told thousands, did I? Oh, that's a bit worrying. Anyway, I wish you all the very best for the future. Please keep listening, as Keir will still be here, pouring through the hundreds of pages of release notes and sharing all the joys of each new release. So thank you, Keir. Thank you to everybody in the audience, and goodbye.
Yeah, you'd be amazed, Clive, how quickly those jokes stack up. You know, it gets into the thousands before you've really noticed. Everybody else notices, but if you're telling them, you don't normally notice.
Well, I'm glad they were recognised.
So as I take a sip of water to try and avoid choking up, we look to the future. We look to a future without Clive, so a bleak future, but also there's some sunshine on the horizon with some beta features that may be coming through. As I've said many times, they may never go live, so tread carefully and make sure you don't come to rely on them. And actually, as this webinar is going on, they might not even be in the release notes anymore. At least one I've done in the past, by the time I spoke about it, wasn't a thing anymore. So until they go live, you can't rely on them. Just before we start on beta features, because we've done all the generally available features, we're just going to run a quick poll and ask our attendees, or those of us that are still awake, if they would like to identify which of the features that we've talked about so far, out of a possible 5, is their favourite. So Clive, would you like to kick off the poll?
Launching the poll now, Captain.
Oh, it's for attendees only, so I don't get to vote. Oh, that's hurtful.
No, attendees only.
Oh, I can see the voting there because the vote's flooding in. My goodness. Oh, the old politicians would love a turnout like this. Oh, we're slowing down now. It's like we might be peaking. Up in the 70s, though. I mean, that's a remarkable turnout. 74. Oh, can we go any higher than 74%? Right, I think we'll give it a couple more seconds and close it then. Maybe we'll keep it open for the 1 minute, Clive, as soon as it ticks over to that.
Right, whatever you say, Kit.
Countdown. 4, 3, 2, 1. Close the poll, Clive.
Poll closed, Captain.
Dynamically generated gauge charts. Yeah, I can see that. A lot of people like that. That was the most popular. Orchestrator and ordering record triggered flows in joint second place. Recent changes in the forecasts only had 17%, so I'm guessing we had a lot of sales reps here, don't like that kind of thing. Lightning available on tablets, only 13%, which I think probably says something about how much tablets are used these days, in all honesty. Feels like their time may have come and gone to some degree. Right, back to the beta features then. The enhanced user experience for permission sets. This makes it easier to search for and filter users to assign for permission sets because you can do it via list views, permission sets and permission set groups. Yeah, you can use list views and you can apply filters, so easier to narrow them down if you've got an awful lot of users rather than just having to page through them. Lightning Web Components now can support, in beta, can support a light DOM. For those of us that have been working in HTML for years, this is the DOM that we've always known for years. So effectively, it supports not using the shadow DOM, which is how everything else on the web works. What that means is that rather than encapsulating in a shadow DOM, it attaches directly to the host element, which means that other elements can see it. That's the whole point of this. There's not a boundary that is blocking them and isolating them. So it makes it accessible to other elements, and it also means that global styling will go into those elements, whereas if they're in the shadow DOM, that is a boundary that global styling cannot cross. It's not available for base components, so that's the Lightning namespace components that Salesforce provide. Many of you will have heard and there was quite a kerfuffle when it was first mentioned, and in some admin webinar, I think, that Flow will be replacing workflow rules at some point in time, some unspecified point in time. So there's no hard deadline on it, but Flow is the future. Workflow rules are definitely in the past. So to soften the blow of this, there's a new Migrate to Flow tool that allows you to choose a workflow rule and then click on a button to migrate to a flow. And you can then test your flow. I would very much recommend that, because just because it thinks it's captured everything and it works as the workflow did, there's no guarantees about that. So make sure you test it, and when you've tested it and you'll decide that you're happy, you can just click the switch activations button. That turns off the workflow and turns on the flow at the same time. So that's quite nice. And that brings us to the end of the features. Only a couple of beta features that looked particularly interesting this time around. As always, there's the official release readiness site. Lots of detail on all the new features, and as usual, there's a trailhead badge that takes you through them to prove you're all over them. And I've got the green tick there because I did that a couple of days ago. Took me a couple of hours, but it's well worth doing because I learned a lot. And with that, I will hand back to Clive and see if we have any questions.
Well, as per usual, Keir, you've explained it so beautifully that we have no questions, I'm afraid. None at all. So everybody
awesome. We've got a couple of people who said all the best to Clive, so I certainly echo that, even though I've got a couple of months more to put up with him.
Thank you guys for your good wishes. Really appreciated. Thank you.
Right then, if there's no questions, I guess we'll call that. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you again in June, early June, hopefully, all things being equal. And I will, in the meantime, be on the hunt for a new presenter. And I'm still hopeful that at some point in time in the future, we'll be able to entice Clive back as a guest starring role. I'll slip him a couple of pints and he'll come and introduce me again, tell us a few more jokes for old time's sake.
Well, you know, who could refuse that? A couple of pints, definitely. Yes, I'd love to.
Alrighty, thank you very much, everyone. See you at the next one.
Have a good day. Cheers, guys. Bye.
Bye-bye.